Spears' class. How to get to Miss Spears' class. How to get to Miss Spears' class. Boom, ba boom, boom, ba boom, boom, ba boom, ba boom, yeah.
I told you, we just have to be nice to our friends. You can't just go around being mean to them. Now you need to apologize to the Febreze spray. You have to apologize. Oh, hi! Hi, kids! Where were we? We were, just ignore what you just saw. It has been several days in quarantine and I have not left this house! When will it end? Okay, it's totally okay.
Hey kids, it's Miss Spears and I'm back, and forget whatever you saw at the beginning of this video. I am completely normal and it's all good over here. Oh God. All right, it's Christmas in March. Woohoo! It's Christmas in March. La 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 la. Hey! Okay, we are on chapter 10 of the Templeton Twins Have an Idea. And just to give you a brief little review, a review. Just to give you a brief little review, the Templeton Twins have been kidnapped, and we don't know for sure if Nanny Nan is alive. So there's that. We don't know where the professor is yet, but I'm sure we're going to find out. Let's get to it.
Chapter 10. Down in the dismal, dank, and dreary dungeon of Dean-de-Dean and Dan-de-Dean. Dean-de-Dean and Dan-de-Dean and the Templeton twins drove for about half an hour, and during the drive, the ridiculous dog, of course, wanted to jump onto the driver's lap, which is how she always liked to ride in the car, with her pointy nose out the window, or, in an even more ridiculous fashion, rubbing against the glass and creating lots of silly marks while she gazed with wild excitement at a perfectly ordinary sights. But John kept a hold of her leash and made her stay in the back. Finally, they reached a house out in the country, at the end of a dirt road, far from the main highway and even farther from any other houses or people. It was a big, old two-story house made of faded white wood planks that were warped and splintery and peeling from age and poor upkeep. Around the yard were old pieces of lawn furniture and a rusted-out lawnmower and not a bit of lawn. "You two are going to be in big trouble," John said. "Nanny Nan called the police, and they're going to find you guys and throw you in jail." "It's called kidnapping," Abigail said. "It's a very serious crime." "Shut up," Dean-de-Dean said. "First Nanny Nan got the wrong number, and then she died, and that wasn't my fault, because I missed, and she had a heart attack." "That's attempted murder," John said. "Son," Dean-de-Dean said, "believe me, there was—" "I'm not your son. I know you're not my son. Just shut up and listen." "Young man, there will be no police, but do not fret. As soon as your father comes through, I'll let you go." "What do you mean, come through?" Abigail said. "Simple." Dean-de-Dean stopped the black SUV on the gravel-covered area in the front of the house, next to an old car painted a tired metallic blue. He switched off the engine, then turned around and looked at the twins. "Your father," he said, "has to acknowledge to the world that the one-man personal helicopter that you put in a knapsack was my idea." "But it wasn't your idea," Abigail said. "Everybody has had that idea." "I had the idea when I was 4, John said, "and Papa had already been working on it a bit by then." "And he has to turn over to me all the titles, the patents, and the ownership of said helicopter, both legal and moral, and all the media, and to be invented, both foreign and domestic, and now, and then, in the future, and in real time, in perpetuity, and throughout the universe, from here to eternity, henceforth, and forevermore, as long as we both shall live." "Amen," Dan-de-Dean said. The brothers got out of the car. Each opened a rear door, and each took twins roughly by the arm. Abigail held onto Cassie's leash, and the frisky, bright white dog happily jumped out too. The Dean-Dean brothers dragged the Templeton twins into the poorly kept house. It smelled like fried salami, beer, and insecticide. Although probably the twins couldn't really identify the smells, they did know, however, that it just smelled bad. "This way," Dean-de-Dean said, and shoved the twins into the kitchen. Abigail noticed what appeared to be a simple drawing of a balloon in a box mounted with magnets on a light green refrigerator. But before she could examine it, Dean banged open a door and propelled her and John through it, down a wobbly wooden staircase into the basement. The basement was lit by 3 harsh, glaring, bare light bulbs, and a bit of daylight coming in through 4 dirty, screened-over windows high on the walls. The room smelled like moist earth, which wasn't so bad, but it was damp and uncomfortable. It felt like a room where bugs should be and people should not be. Cassie, of course, wagged her tail rapidly and looked perky and ready for anything, as though we were just on another thrilling episode of an exciting, glorious adventure. "You two make yourselves comfortable," Dean said. "I will contact your father and tell him the terms of your release." "Wait a minute," John said. "The personal one-man helicopter isn't even finished yet. Papa says he is," and he turned to his sister. "What's it called?" "A prototype." "Yeah, a prototype, but that's all. He hasn't sold it to any company yet, so there's no money, and you're going to tell him to give you stuff that doesn't even exist." Dean smiled. While he was smiling, "Let me tell you what a prototype is. Unless, of course, you already know. Do you?" "Oh, no, you do? Oh, isn't that splendid? Good for you. Then why don't you tell me what it is? Go on, I'm waiting. Tell me what a prototype is." "I notice you haven't told me anything." "Very well, then I shall tell you. When you invent a new thing, you make a sample of it and show it to other people. To demonstrate what it does and how it works. How if you specifically handmade original first example of this invention. There are usually only a few prototypes of the new invention, and often there is only one, and you have made it. Don't even bother telling me that you already knew that, because I simply know that you did not." Dean, stop smiling. "It's not just about the money," he said. "I want the recognition. I want to be known far and wide as the man who invented the personal one-man helicopter that you put in a knapsack, and people will look at me and think, 'Hey, wait a minute, isn't he the guy that invented the one-man helicopter? Good for him.' And then a college will give me an honorary degree, and then a university will hire me to be a dean of a college of arts and sciences." Abigail said, "But then that would make you Dean? "Exactly!" the man said with wild, crazed smile. Dean? Abigail said. It sounds silly." "It sounds like 'Here Comes the Bride.'" John said. Dean looked angry. "Just wait here," he said, "and try not screaming for help. There's nobody within 20 miles of this place." And with that, he stomped off into the wooden stairs and slammed the door behind him. John sighed. Then he walked quietly up the stairs and slowly tried the knob. It turned, but when he pushed against the door, it didn't move. He went back down the steps. "It's locked," he told Abigail. "Maybe there's another door somewhere," she said. As the twins wandered around looking for another door, they were able to see exactly what was in the basement, and there was a lot. There was an old wooden tables and old wooden chairs, old cans splintered and splattered with leftover paint, along with paintbrushes that had turned crusty and hard. There were piles of lumber. Standing in the middle of everything like a giant hulking beast was a huge, round, black furnace with monstrous arms snaking out on different directions and disappearing into the ceiling. There was a stack of mirrors leaning against the wall, some with frames, some without. There were a million cardboard boxes full of stuff. There were old ladders, old lamps, old ropes, random piles of bricks and rocks, and dust-covered bags of cement. There was a huge, rusty old wrench that weighed a ton. Oh, yes! And there was spider webs everywhere, too. What there wasn't was another door. "You know," Abigail said, "just because Dean said there wasn't any people nearby if we called for help, doesn't mean it's true." John nodded. The twins each took a deep breath and began to yell for help. Now, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of yelling for help. It's pretty much straightforward. A matter of shouting, "Help!" as loudly as you can. And that is what the twins did. Cassie, of course, thought this was an activity for her benefit, and quite ridiculously, she began barking back at the twins. This went on for about 2 minutes, which isn't a very long time when it comes to such matters as cooking dinner or flying to Brazil, but when it involves continual shouting as hard as you can fairly long enough time, and finally it brought results. Unfortunately, for the twins, the results were not as they hoped. No one came to help them. Instead, the door of the top of the stairs opened, and Dandy Dean came halfway down the steps. "You're wasting your breath," he said. There's no one within 50 miles of this place. Your brother said 20 miles, John said. Fine, 20 miles, just stop. Besides, he said, Dean just left to pick up your father, and once he gives Dean everything connected to the personal one-man helicopter, we'll let you go. Dandy Dean started to go back up the stairs. Wait, Abigail said. Why are you doing this? We know why your brother is doing this, because he's crazy. But why are you? Dean looked at her as though she had asked the silliest question in the world. I have to, he said. We're twins. And with that, Dean went back up the steps and shut the door again. That's ridiculous, John said. I don't do something just because you do it. We're twins. His sister nodded a little, as though she were thinking of something else, which John knew she was. Suddenly, she looked at him and said, This is serious. We have to get out of here. Because Papa won't give Dean the helicopter. She shook her head. No, even if Papa does give him the helicopter he asked for, they're not going to let us go. They've kidnapped us, and if they let us go, we'll tell the police, and they'll go to jail. John felt his mouth go dry, which is what happens when you become really, really afraid of something. You're right. Dean killed Nanny Nan, which means he'll try to kill us, too. Questions for review. What is burlap? Do you think it is anything different now that it is in the previous chapter? Check 1. If the narrator's definition of prototype was interesting and complete. Yes or yes, very. Question 3. Match the items in the column A with the description in column B. Column A, this chapter, the last chapter, the next chapter, the narrator. Column B, excellent, fascinating, perfect, wonderful. Questions for review.
This video is brought to you by LWE, Lakewood Elementary. Learning for you and me. Yeah.